Hello and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel in the first place. Today we have a Tamaki X listener. It's The Budding Trees by Halo Saximus on AO3, the link will be in the description, and let's go ahead and get into it. There had always been something a little odd about that forest, to say the least. The trees were spaced considerably apart, with winding roots and huge canopies that held tens of birds' nests at a time. In the morning there was always mist that kissed the earliest rays of sunlight. The streams were always clear, no matter how much washing was done in them from your small village on the outskirts of the woods, and every now and again a white stag could be seen far away through the underbush, just out of reach and swiftly out of sight. It was like something out of a storybook. Maybe that's what made it so strange. You'd never venture too deep. You'd gather what you needed, be it berries or nuts or firewood, and you'd scramble back to your village before sunfall. There'd never been anything threatening in the forest. At least, you hadn't seen any bears or wolves there in your life. But to be there at night seemed intrusive. That was the first word that came to mind, though you weren't quite sure what was so intrusive about it. It was all just very odd. But there was one day you'd ventured out too far, too close to sundown, and found yourself rushing through the trees and over the winding roots to try and beat nightfall. The forest wasn't so kind that night, however, as you tripped over one of the roots and toppled straight down the side of an overhang. Your first thought upon opening your eyes was something's broken. You could feel the hurt, though you were sure you would have been able to feel much more of it if you weren't so in shock. So you laid there and cried after a while when the feeling started coming back to your broken leg as the night loomed over. The path of mushrooms beneath you glowed azure and violet, something you'd never seen from any forest, and the fireflies didn't disperse with the lateness of the hour. Instead, they began to grow closer, looking down at you before quickly flying off again. Then a badger came along, peering down from the overhang. You expected it to gouge your eyes out, but instead it made a strange noise and hurried off just as the badger had. You felt strangely alone once it had gone. There was no one for a mile at least, you knew, and they would have been asleep by now. There was no chance at help until morning. You weren't even going to try and stand. You already knew your leg was beyond repair. If by chance you were rescued, they would probably have to amputate it, like you'd seen happen to one of the village elders when you were younger. You'd always dreaded that happening. You guessed you had no choice. The whole forest floor seemed to start glowing, just as the mushrooms were. The azure and violet met brilliant luminescent greens, and you swore you could see something twinkling gold somewhere far away. It gave you something to focus on instead of the pain in your leg that you were becoming increasingly aware of. But then, from the overhang, you could hear something approaching from the underbush. You cried louder, unable to do much else, hoping it was a person. From the overhang, a white stag peered down, just as the badger had. But unlike the badger, it slowly made its way down the hillside to find you. Looking down at your twisted leg, it then called out to the forest, low and blaring, until a human pair of eyes peered down from the overhang after it. Well, they looked human, but you couldn't be so sure from the colossal pair of antlers it had on its head. You closed your eyes and assumed you were already dead. Only you were surprised to find that you weren't when they opened again, this time to the inside of a little cottage of sorts. The gentle sunlight steamed through the open window and shined on a singular small room, its walls covered in shelves that overflowed with bowls and bottles. You were on a bed against the only open wall space other than the small wash basin and the counter beneath the window, and just to make sure you weren't dead, you wiggled your toes. You wiggled the toes of both feet and only realized what that meant when you recalled what had happened before. A round little bird came to sit on the windowsill as you shot up out of bed, looking down at your legs. The one that had been broken still ached, perhaps too much to stand, but it was healed nonetheless. The bird chirped at you from its perch, and you looked at it hoping it would provide some answers to your countless questions. Instead, the door opened, and the man with antlers ducked through the doorway with a bowl under his arm. His eyes widened at you when he looked up. "Oh, he stared, seeming almost frightened, and you couldn't help the initial dread that sparked in your chest. However, just as you were calming down, he set his bowl on a stool next to the door and had turned to leave. He reached out a hand as if he wasn't across the room. Wait, please." His hand was still on the door as he slowly turned his head, back still facing you. "I have, a lot of questions if you don't mind." He looked down at the little chair by your bed. He must have been sitting in it when he was healing your leg. Can you come sit, please?" His hands gripped the white silk tunic that flowed around his figure, swallowing before finally turning towards you. He made hesitant steps towards you, in a way that reminded you of a real deer. You stayed still as he came to sit in the chair next to you. You cleared your throat, trying to twist your body to at least partially face him before giving up. What's your name?" you asked. His hands ringed together in his lap. "Tamaki." "It's nice to meet you, Tamaki," he smiled. Then, looking up to his antlers again, "Are you human?" No, he swallowed, refusing to look at you. "I'm a fairy of this forest, the fairy guardian." "You're the spirit of this forest?" you inclined, an old tale coming to mind. He finally met your eye, nodding furiously, as he looked back down at his lap. His antlers almost hit you as he nodded, seeing as how they were really large. They seemed as tall as his chest, and fanned out even more so. The bird from the sill came to sit on them, as did another. You fiddled with the hem of the blanket. "My mother once told me a story about forest spirits. She said they were devious tricksters to any humans who encountered them." You looked up to find him gazing back. His nervousness faded with how much he was focusing on you. "You don't seem too devious, though. You seem rather kind." We've only just met." "I know." You smiled again, then you inclined. "How long was I asleep?" "Just the night," he answered, looking down at your leg beneath the blanket. "You healed me overnight? How?" His hands ringed together again. "Herbs," he pointed to the bottles and bowls lining the shelves, "and water and magic." You nodded over to the bowl he'd left by the door. "Were you going to heal me again?" "Oh, no, He stood, quickly making his way to the door. His antler nearly knocked a bottle off of the shelf before he quickly caught it. You kept your giggles to yourself as he brought the bowl back to the bed. "I was going to wash the herbs off, replace them." "Oh, I see." You pulled the blanket back, realizing he dressed you in one of his floor-length tunics. You almost blushed at the thought of him having seen you undressed before you realized that nudity probably didn't mean much to a fairy. But even with this assumption, you still watched him swallow as you pulled the tunic up to expose your leg to him. It was wrapped in a fine white cloth, now stained green with the herbs packed beneath it, seeping through like dye. You saw him hesitate in reaching out, so you gave him a nod, trying again to shift your leg towards him, and finding a bit more success than you had before. He started at your ankle, where it was tied, and slowly unwound it, careful not to let any of the now used herbs touch the sheets. He grabbed the bowl and brought a wet cloth tentatively to your leg. His hand began to shake as the cloth made contact with your herb-stained leg, but you didn't shy away. "Oh, I'm sorry, I should have been more careful." He began to apologize profusely, and you grabbed his wrist before he could pull away. Your eyes met his as you brought it slowly back to your leg. I'm sorry. "I'm fine, Tamaki. You can keep going. You have nothing to apologize for." You let go of his wrists and instead gripped the sheets for leverage. "Of course, for even as much as you have kindly healed me, it will still hurt, but no matter. You may do your work. I do not shatter easily." He bit his cheek as he looked between you and your leg. You sucked in a breath. "Though, if you wouldn't mind, I feel I may find this easier to bear if you'd be so kind as to hold a conversation with me." Tamaki dipped the rag back into the bowl as it ran a bit dry. What kind of conversation?" "Well, I would like to know you better, if you don't mind discussing yourself." "I'm afraid I do," he stuttered, slowly wringing out the rag, "but only because I don't find much about myself worth sharing." "What nonsense," you said, and he looked up at you with wide eyes. "You're a fairy. No one knows much of fairies, much less of you. There's so much to discuss, Sir Tamaki." He blinked and slowly brought the rag back to your leg. You were too busy staring at him to flinch. "Well, what would you like to know?" You spent the next half hour asking countless questions about his species and his life as he cleaned your leg, and then continued to do so as much as he pressed more wet herbs into your skin and muttered little spells under his breath. He told you how he was born from the trees, though he couldn't quite remember it, and how he'd always been on his own. He'd only met a few humans in his lifetime, and sheepishly admitted that none had been as interesting or forgiving as you. You didn't ask what he meant by forgiving. He said that the stag was the forest heart, and that he was the forest's breath. It was all very strange indeed, but alas, you couldn't keep yourself from hanging on to every word, as if it was scripture. Tamaki must have grown tired of talking about himself, for as he finished wrapping and healing your leg, he began to ask about you. "I live in a village, just at the edge of the forest," you said, picking at your blanket. "I don't do much else but wash and sew clothes for others. I probably won't have much to do until I'm married anyway." "I've heard of marriage," you said, "though not much good of it." "It's not very good at all, at least for me, I think. There's no one I fancy spending the rest of my life with in the village, much less bearing children with. I'm just fine sewing men's trousers." "You're not happy," he said, more as an observation than a statement. You nodded. He looked down at his lap and picked at his tunic. "I don't think I'm happy either." "Why do you think that?" You spoke, your voice growing soft. He shifted closer with a sigh. "It's very lonely out here, which is silly of me, I know." "No, I don't know. Why would you find that silly?" Your hand moved to rest comfortingly on his knee. He swallowed again. "Well, fairies are very independent creatures. We live only to breathe life into the trees. There's no need for another, and very rarely any longing for another as well. And yet, when the birds stop singing at night, it all becomes rather quiet." Your brow furrowed in thought, though you hadn't put much consideration into your next words. You were sure of yourself when you offered, "In that case, perhaps when I'm healed, I can visit you?" Tamaki blinked up at you, and you smiled sheepishly at him. "It's just, we're both so unhappy without another to keep in good company. So I would like to be your friend if you'll have me." His eyes grew wet with emotion, and his hand slid over your own on his knee. You smiled even brighter at his touch. "If I may be so honored." With shaking hands, he brought your knuckles to his lips, kissing them delicately before resting it back on his knee. Your chest blossomed at the feel of it. "Though I'm not quite sure what companionship entails. I'm sorry." "You have nothing to apologize for," you repeated. Leaning forward, Tamaki smiled back. "I'd be more than happy to teach you of companionship. I'm certain you'll find it easier and much less daunting than it seems." He studied you for a long moment, antlers tilting just slightly with his head, and you couldn't help but grin at the sight. He nodded warmly in return. "I'll take your word for it." You spent your time in bed, chatting until you were well enough to walk that evening. In the morning, when it was time to return to your village, he lifted you effortlessly and set you back on the stag, who was so tall it was hard to mount, even as it sat for you, and led you to the outskirts of the forest. He stopped just far away enough that you wouldn't be spotted by the townspeople and helped you off the stag. Your hands remained on his shoulders from where you'd use him as support, beaming up at him. "You've been so incredibly kind, Tamaki. When will I see you again?" "As soon as you're able," he smiled, gesturing to your still aching leg. You noticed that his stutter wasn't so much from anxiousness as it had been before, and instead sounded with the implication of another meeting, another little adventure. It brought a warmth to your chest. "I'll find you at night. You just have to wish for me, and I'll feel you in the forest, wherever you are." "Thank you, Tamaki." You stood on the toes of your good leg and pressed a gentle kiss into his cheek, perhaps as payment for the kiss he'd left on your knuckles before. His cheeks were flushed bright red when you pulled away, and you could feel your own heating with it. Your hand slipped from his shoulders as you stepped back. "Farewell for now. Farewell." You took one last look at him before turning and limping back towards your village. You didn't hear the stag set off for another minute or so behind you, but you couldn't blame him. A part of you wished you could stay with him forever, but perhaps some things only come with time.